This is Books for Breakfast, a podcast where we talk about books and writing. I'm Enda Wiley.
And I'm Freya Sirr.
And you're all very welcome to this morning's show.
On this morning's show, a mix of poetry and espionage, what it's like to qualify as a solicitor and give up law on the same day.
So, the coffee's made.
The toast is on.
And the books are on the table.
And I see you've got a couple of books of poems there on the table in front of you. Do you want to tell us what they are?
Yeah, I do indeed. And they're really brilliant books of poems. They're small, compact books. I love books like that you can just put in your pocket or your bag and carry with you. I'm a real advocate for reading short poems and just carrying them around in your pocket and in your head all day. So the first book I brought in is called Short and Sweet, 101 very short poems, edited by the UK Poet Laureate Simon Armitage. The longest poem has 13 lines and the shortest has no lines at all.
So no sonnets then?
No, I don't think so. The longest and the first in the book is Emily Dickinson's After Great Pain, a Formal Feeling Comes. And the shortest, would you like to hear what the shortest is, Peter?
I would.
It's the last in the book, actually. It's John Patterson's, and it goes on going to meet a Zen master in the Kyushu Mountains and not finding him for AG, and that's it. So
it's just a title and the rest is blank.
Exactly.
I'm just curious about the number 13. Why is 13 the cut-off point?
Well, I mean, I think this is a choice by Simon Armitage himself. You see, the introduction to this book is actually excellent as well. It comes with quite a quick-witted introduction with lots of pithy points, which really are hard not to disagree with. I think it was his choice to do that. And I think it's good structure, a good framework for the book. I like some of his comments. He says, the short poem at its best brings about an almost instantaneous surge of both understanding and sensation unavailable elsewhere. Its effect should not be underestimated and its design not confused with convenience. I think that's really true. I think a lot of readers might think, oh, it's just a short poem, I can throw it away.
Is there a sense that the short poem is somehow not valued much in our society, whatever, that people are a little bit iffy about it? Is that what he's trying to address?
Yeah, I definitely think that. I think Simon Armitage, as would most people who read poetry and know about poetry, they would know that it's actually extremely difficult to write a short poem. In fact, I feel as a practitioner myself, it might even be harder to write a short poem than it is to write a long one. And he just goes on to prove how the short poem can be packed with complex narratives, argument, passion, love, wisdom, music, really everything. As he says, concentration in its concentrated form. So in the poems in this book, like there are some very well-known ones, like William Carlos's Williams, This Is Just to Say. I'm sure you know that poem, Peter. That I've eaten the plums that were in the icebox and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet and so cold. There are other wonderful poems like I love In the Desert by Stephen Crane. In the desert I saw a creature, naked, bestial, who squatting upon the ground held his heart in his hands and ate of it. I said, is it good, friend? It is bitter, bitter, he answered. But I like it because it is bitter and because it is my heart.
Yeah, because I like, there's something about short poems that I like a lot. And I think like there's always been, throughout literary history, there's been a bit of a struggle sometimes between short poems and long poems. I mean, I can remember reading, back in 300 BC, the Callimachus writing short poems. And he had this idea, he said, mega biblion cacon, the big book is bad. And we want little books now. We want little poems. Forget your Homer and all that kind of stuff. Or I think, indeed, I think of, the great Japanese tradition. I think of all those great, single line poems. I mean, the haiku that were often, or that are in Japanese written as a single line. I mean, people like Issa and Busan. I mean, poems like, goes out, comes back, love life of a cat. Or the man pulling radishes points my way with a radish. That's Issa.
Yeah, I mean, they're brilliant poems to read. I also love, it's a famous love poem. It's just, we're not sure who wrote it many centuries ago. It's just anonymous. Western wind, when wilt thou blow? The small rain down can rain. Christ, if my love were in my arms and I in my bed again.
Yeah, one of the best loved poems in the English language, probably. Yeah,
most definitely. And then there is humour in this book that Simon Armitage has edited as well. I like Christopher Logue's To a Friend in Rural Isolation, When all else fails, try whales.
Oh, that's very unfair in ways, isn't it?
Oh, very unfair. And then what about Charles Simic? There's an ominous kind of quality to this poem, Evening Chess. The Black Queen raised high in my father's hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good stuff. So I think fair play to Simon Armitage, really, and I think I recommend this book, Peter. So that's why I brought it in.
It's an old one. It came out several years ago. I mean, I know it's one I've had. In fact, I think I've bought several copies of it because I've used it so often.
Yeah, well, this copy is extremely well thumbed. It came out actually in 1988 and it's published by Faber and Faber. And I definitely would recommend that. As a companion piece, I did bring in as well, you can see it here on the table, The Hip Flask, Short Poems from Ireland, edited by our current Ireland Chair of Poetry, Frank Ormsby. And I'm not sure, is this book, it can be tricky to get, but it is available if you check.
Yeah, well, it came out from Blackstaff years ago. It may not be in print, but it should be possible to get your hands on a copy if you want. Yeah, it's sort of good stuff
really
as well.
Good stuff. So you've poets like Carl O'Sharkey, Gaten Carl Matthews, Chris Agee, Dermot Bulger, Michael O'Loughlin, Nuala Ní Gonal. Oh, there's just really good poems in this.
Tom Matthews as well, some great stuff.
Oh, Tom Matthews, Even the Whales.
Yeah, I love that.
Even the whales now communicate sparingly with staccato cries. Polyphony was yesterday's song. We are minimalists now, even the whales.
I noticed whale poems because you had another choice there, and I noticed a whale poem in that.
Well, I think you're referring to this other book that I brought in. It's called The Word Ark. It's a pocket anthology of poems responding to our fellow creatures, great and small. And it's published by Daedalus Press. And what I really admire about this book is that Pat Moran, the editor of Daedalus Press, brought this book out right in the middle of lockdown. So I'd like to congratulate him on it. It's a pocket-sized book and it really is quite small and neat. It's got beautiful illustrations by Gaetano Tranquino, a Sicilian artist and illustrator. And I admire the way Pat has laid out the contents page because it's the animals that take prominence, not the poets, even though the poets wrote these poems. So you have poems about badgers, beetles, blackbirds, cows.
We're not allowed to mention that you have a couple of poems in it yourself, isn't that right?
Well, actually, I do have some poems in it, but I would like to mention on the page, one of my poems I have is about a hare, but I'm sharing the same page with another Enda, actually, another poet called Enda Coyle Green, and she has written a poem about a hare as well. And I'd like to read this poem. I think it's a really fine poem from Enda Coyle Green in The Word Ark. The Hare. Somewhere between Drogheda and Dunleer, I saw a leggy hare crossing an open field. The train seemed slowed to the animal's lope, his ancient shape shifting unrequited traipse to the cover of trees. But in the time it takes a gaze to angle, steady aim, the hare and I weren't there, his life, my life, lost in the lick of wheels on track, that instant velocity of always elsewhere. I like that.
That's very good. There's a couple that I like as well. If you give us the book there, Mrs.
Yeah.
I like, for instance, like those, just to lower the tone a bit, animal-wise, I liked John Kelly's poem about rats, for instance.
Yeah, that's a very good poem.
Just, you can't have an animal poem without having a rat in it, I think. There's always rats, even at beauty spots like Sandyman Strand, where the trouser leg of blooms shuddered at the sight of Jerry's upper thighs. These rocks are rife with rats and labyrinthine. And the other one, I'm grabbing the book now from Enda, but
this is really unfair, Peter, what you're up to.
I just like
You're stealing my thunder.
Bartle has a nice poem about whales.
You're stealing the poem that I really like.
Okay, sure, you read it then.
Well, what I feel about this is Leland is much missed poet in Ireland. She died in 2016 and she has written a really great poem in this book called The Song of the Whale. I'm actually going to be really generous and allow Peter to read this poem. And we're going to think about Leland as he reads it.
Excellent. And the whale beached in Lislarry, and they brought the JCB and buried it, all 30 foot of it. They said it was black, shining skin from the sea, grey-blue, some argued, all 30 foot of it. And the whalemen came. They came all the way from Cork, for that is where the whalemen and the dolphin men hang out. And they made their notes and ecological plans and took blood samples and measured the tide so that the whale now lies under the limestone reaches, proud steps to the summer storm, turquoise and shimmering, guest sea mammal, partner of song.
And I can almost hear Leland's voice there in that poem. That's a really strong poem. And she's speaking of Corkmen there. I was thinking of Jerry Murphy's poem, What? And maybe we'd end on this poem and just to say that I would recommend The Word Ark, a pocket book of animal poems edited by Pat Moran, illustrated by Gaetano Tranquino, with beautiful illustrations. And this is Jerry Murphy, as usual, the raucous voice from Cork. What? I am up close to the radio, listening late and at low volume to the World Service. When the house shudders, my brother is tumbling purposefully down the stairs, 18 stones of spluttering indignation in a tiny red underpants, bearing a message from his wife. Would you ever go to bed? You're keeping the canary awake.
Oh, the poor canary. And again, details of all these books are available on our site, booksforbreakfast.buzzsprout.com. Today's Toaster Challenge guest, Nick Kelly, has had a busy life of many parts. There's a music part, a filmmaking part, and an advertising part. A singer-songwriter, he was the leading part of that fine rock band, The Fat Lady Sings. Then there's the collective Alien Envoy, The Unelectables, which I've seen described as a raucous bunch of former future rock stars. Also much solo work. Nick scored a notable film success as writer and director with his first feature, The Drummer and the Keeper, about the unlikely friendship that develops between a bipolar drummer in a rock band and a teenage goalkeeper with Asperger's. And it went on to win multiple awards at film festivals around the world, and anybody who saw that will know what a remarkable film it was. I'm getting exhausted already. But as if that wasn't enough, there's also a long career in advertising, of which the most recent achievement is an ad for Barry's Tea, which I'm sure lots of people have seen. The one with the two sisters, one in Dublin and one in Brooklyn, kind of based on a true story. I think you have a fondness for the Atlantic Ocean, Nick, if that's fair to say. I was thinking that was you, wasn't it, with the two brothers fighting and one swimming across the ocean to make it up.
Yeah, well, New York is kind of my happy place. I went to New York. I was among one of the things that I don't put on my CV so much is that I actually qualified as a solicitor, but I gave up the same day because I was kind of a useless, or I would have been a useless solicitor. But as part of my training, just to stop myself dying of boredom, I got a placement in a huge law firm in New York. I mean, I completely fluked into it. I should never have got there. So I got to spend this transcendent 6 months in the late 80s in New York City. And that kind of turned, when I came back, I started The Fat Lady Sings. I gave up law the day I qualified. And then I made everybody else give up their jobs and moved to London to try and be rock stars. So New York sort of turned me into, it was so freeing to me. And, you know, since then, I got to go back, I after The Fat Lady Sings, I sort of stumbled into being a copywriter, and then I found that even though I'd never studied art or anything, actually writing visual stories is a thing that I think a lot of songwriters are quite visual writers anyway, and sure. I think maybe I'm more that bit of my songwriting was always more of a thing than it would have been from other people. And so I kind of started writing TV ads. And so then I go back to New York with Michael Fassbender and, you know, because I wrote an ad where he swims to New York to make up after a quarrel. And then some years later, MoMA incredibly chose a short film of mine to feature in one of their exhibition of their 9 favorite films from around the festival circuit. So I just thought, I'm never going to be in MoMA for anything ever again in my life. So I have to go over. So I went over and stayed in the Chelsea Hotel for one night, the squalid Chelsea Hotel. And then most recently, with The Fat Lady Sings as well, you know, we got to play in New York a lot. So,
but it's an ongoing source of inspiration.
Yeah, well, even of inspiration and also just of permission, I think. Yeah. It's not so much, it doesn't affirm you, New York, but it doesn't stop you.
Yeah, I mean, if I could ask you, Nick, I mean, how do you balance all the various roles? I mean, do they compete with each other? Do they give each other a hard time?
I mean, they compete in terms of just, you know, hours and days. And, you know, when you're making a film, I think it's very hard to play music. But they're pretty complementary as actual disciplines. I mean, I think they're all the same thing, really. I think everything's, you know, it's funny. When I look back, I didn't plan it this way, but actually even law is weirdly helpful. Though I don't think I was very cut out to be a lawyer, but that way it sort of makes you think in a bit of a logical way. And that's incredibly helpful for advertising, but also just, you know, in all those kinds of creative pursuits, there are moments where you have to make decisions, and sometimes they're creative decisions, and sometimes they're, you know, much more practical, you know, business decisions. But so I think they all sort of met. I see a commonality. I mean, I think between writing, you know, it's really weird. Even like between filmmaking and music. I mean, but I like the idea that I'm allowed to do more than one thing, and I do think they really cross-fertilize in all sorts of strange ways. I mean, I think in terms of if I have my, you know, there's a thing about film which is kind of very exciting to me because I've come to it so late in my life, and I honestly don't think I could have made films in my 20s because I don't think I really had any stories to tell. I was very bad at writing story songs. It was only when I think you have to have some edges knocked off yourself to be able to come to the end of stories somehow. And the other great thing about filmmaking compared to rock and roll is you don't have to be so young and pretty, because you can just hire other people to be young and pretty if you're on my side of the camera. So obviously, just from a purely practical point of view, I mean, I'm very proud of, you know, the last record I made. But, you know, I'm not naive about, you know, people that think, oh, it's that guy who wrote Arclight a quarter of a century ago. He's got a new record out.
I think I'm going to move you on, Nick, to the toaster challenge, and you know this is where we put our guests, I suppose, under a little bit of pressure in that we give you just 2 minutes to talk about a book or that meant something to you. That doesn't necessarily have to be a favorite, but and this is where I get to put down the bread in the toaster, and when it's nicely done, then you will come to a conclusion. So I'm just very curious to see what your toaster challenge was, and I'm going to count you into it now. I'm going to put the bread in right now. So here we go. One, two, three. The bread's down.
Okay, so the book that I thought I would choose is a book by John le Carré. I'm a huge fan of John le Carré, and I always think that if he had written not about spies but about other things, he would get more critical acclaim, because I think he's a kind of a beautiful, kind of astonishing chronicler of kind of human beings and different kinds of human beings. And I mean, I really love his book, A Perfect Spy, which is about fathers, and I love lots of his books. But the one that probably means most to me is one of the first I read, which is Smiley's People. Smiley's People is actually the third in a trilogy. So at this point, Smiley, who is a small, bespectacled, cuckolded early German scholar who happens to have been brought in as a broom to clean up the terrible mess of the British Secret Service, which has been betrayed by one of his best friends who also slept with his wife. And he's had every kind of indignity and misery thrown at him. And it's an incredibly exciting book. So even if you haven't read the first two in the trilogy, it starts with this Polish immigrant colonel who's been let down by the British establishment, but through his sources from Eastern Europe, it's all during the Cold War, he gets a little breadcrumb of information. And through this breadcrumb, Smiley, through all of the things that aren't about shooting and chasing pretty women, but like by really rigorous work with the kinds of weird people who end up actually being spies, they finally trap Carla and get him to defect, who's the nemesis on the other side in Moscow Center. And what I love about this book is it's, first of all, the idea of the Secret Service as actually this kind of underfunded kind of land commission kind of place where people have to put their receipts in, and the kinds of people who end up being spies, as opposed to being like James Bond, they're all the kinds of people who very often end up in prison. As Le Carre himself was a spy, and his father was a spy, and his father was also kind of a petty crook and a swindler. So the kinds of people in peacetime who typically end up in debt or bankrupt or in jail, they have a good war, because those are the kinds of people you need to drop behind enemy lines. And so many people, like Patrick Leigh Fermor was another one like that. So I just love that. The Carre's books are full of those kind of messy, weird people who sometimes have a use for the government. And right at the end of the book, there's a scene, and this is the reason I chose it probably, where they're waiting in West Berlin, and there's a bridge over the river, and there's a guy who they've only ever seen one photograph 30 years before, and Smiley has once met him, but basically, is this man going to defect? And they see this little shabby character, and the bridge is picked out by arc lights, and I'd never seen that word in a text before, and that's where I got the word which gave me my song, arc lights. So I just love that thing. After this huge journey, this little cuckolded, kind of recessive kind of spy master, finally his prey is walking across this footbridge into his clutches. I just love it. And I love the thing that the spies are a bit like artists and a bit like lawyers, is they all have much more in common with each other than any of them do with the people who employ them or who go to see them play. So there's a great sympathy and empathy between the two. And you can sort of see, I mean, Le Carre's big thing is all about double agents, really. It's like that, in order to be a really good spy, there's a sort of kind of faithlessness and a sort of a promiscuity at your heart that means that you can always be turned if you meet the right other spy.
That's great, Nick. That's a perfect description of that book. I mean, it's funny. Le Carre is definitely somebody. You read him first years ago, and you've gone back to them. I find that with a lot of writers like that. I mean, all those political circumstances have changed. I mean, the Cold War is a piece of history that we might have forgotten about almost, but still that whole world is there, and you can enter it at any time.
Well, I think Le Carre has said himself that, he was kind of bereft when the Berlin Wall came down. And I was in Berlin in February myself at the Berlinale, and it's such a, I mean, there can be no place maybe in the planet where so much of the last century's history is concentrated into such a small square miles as That's Berlin. Right. But I think it was such a, and you forget about it. I mean, the Berlin Wall went up the year I was born and came down I was there about 9 months before it came down. So it wasn't actually that long a period in the grand scheme of things. But I think for anybody of our sort of vintage, it was such a huge shadow it cast across the world. I mean, we're worried about pandemics now, but I mean, we were worried about, the cartoon about the old couple and the nuclear winter, Raymond Briggs's. Oh yeah, the something with When the Wind Blows. We were, that was our reality, and it's so weird to me, if you go to, Macedonia, or if you go to, Poland now, and these are all different countries, and Czech, but we just thought Russia started at, the Brandenburg Gate, and that was how we saw it, So I think it took Le Carre a long time to find, I think he said himself, a new palette. But I mean, all this stuff was about humans, but it was just the absurdities of the Cold War and the kind of the pressures. I think they were such a good canvas for those human relations that he wanted to describe.
I'm kind of interested in all that kind of all that kind of ordinary human, the foibles, the treachery, the deals, the sheer dodginess of it all. And you mentioned his father. I mean, there's a lot of his own life kind of there indirectly, isn't there?
Oh, A Perfect Spy is kind of the best book I've ever read about fathers. I mean, his father, there's a beautiful article in I think it was The Independent, where it was a sort of long biographical piece, and he talked about his father. So his father was a spy, and so was the family business. But his father was he was a sort of a showman and a kind of like a playboy, and he he was like a confidence trickster. We just, and he would roll up. He'd enroll Le Carre in a kind of a minor public school, and then on sports day he'd come down in a Rolls Royce with 3 women, none of whom was Le Carre's mother, and they would go to Goodwood and they would get him drunk in champagne and then bribe the gate lodge master to let him in after hours. And then 2 months later, the headmaster, there'd be this terribly embarrassing interview where Le Carre would say, well, unfortunately the fees haven't been paid. And his father would have been convicted and would be in debtor's prison. And so Le Carre then would be sent to like a red brick camp. And then his father would be out again and mysteriously in funds again. And he had a little crew of kind of devoted disciples around him, and suddenly Le Carre would be in another public school for a term and a half. So that was his whole life, and I think he's incredibly good on men having a weakness for other men, and it's not even a sexual thing, but like just that the loneliness and the yearning of it's like they are like schoolboys. I mean, I know The Honourable Schoolboy is one of his books, but there's a sort of a boyish thing which lots of us did never lose, but certainly it continues well into middle age. And I think he's really good at that.
The great things for me about these challenges is that they make you want to go back to books you might have read before, or to go back and read books. I mean, I want to read now. I haven't read A Perfect Spy that you mentioned there, for instance, and I've got a burning desire to go to it. And thank you to Nick Kelly for accepting this week's Toaster Challenge. If you want to keep up with Nick's activities, you can go to nickkelly.ie. He's been doing a few concerts streaming through Facebook. If you want to keep up with those, you can find him on Facebook as well.
I think we've reached the end of our Books for Breakfast podcast this morning. I'm definitely rushing off to have more coffee. And I'm Enda Wiley, and I have Peter Sirr here with me. And Peter, would you like to tell everyone about the details of the podcast if they'd like to listen again?
Well, you can subscribe at all the usual sources, Google and Apple and so on. And if you want to check out the notes that go along with this podcast, you can go to booksforbreakfast.buzzsprout.com. And so
we'll be back again next Thursday morning. We'll have the toast on, we'll have the kettle boiling, we will have more books to discuss, and we're looking forward to having you here. So goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.